Hello everyone, I'm Rachael Lowe from Physiopedia and today I'm talking to Dr Veronika Schoeb, who is a physiotherapist from Switzerland. Hello Veronika.
Hi, Rachel. Nice to have me here.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm looking forward to talking to you about an article that you've recently written on global health. But before we delve into that, maybe you could just give us a little introduction to yourself and the work that you normally do.
Yeah, well, I will try to answer this question. It's a little bit more complex. So I'm a Swiss-trained physiotherapist, working first in Switzerland, and then I moved to the US. So I worked as a physio in the US, kind of realized that actually the patients are the same, but the system is quite different. I went on to a master degree and got into a little bit research, and it was pretty much in New York City with the marginalized population, Chinese seniors and drug users. Then I went back to Switzerland, where I started actually in higher education, and I started to enter the physiotherapy program in Lausanne. And at the same time, I actually did my PhD in sociology because I got interested in the interactional aspects of physiotherapy and patients' interactions. Finished my PhD, and currently I'm actually living in Hong Kong. So again, a completely different context where I work. I used to work as a physio as well, and I'm now, the last 2 years, I have been at the university, the Polytechnic University in Hong Kong, as faculty, doing some research as well as some practice, but mainly teaching and research.
So your experience is quite interesting because you've worked in a lot of different countries, and often when I talk to people who have worked in a lot of different countries, they've worked in all the low resource settings around the world, and you've actually worked in a lot of countries that are from high resource settings, which is actually really interesting. So this has made me quite interested in what we're going to talk about today, because I contacted you because in relation to the global health course that we're running soon, because you recently wrote an editorial in the Hong Kong Journal of Physiotherapy, and the title was "Non-Communicable Diseases Are the Biggest Challenges of the 21st Century. What is the physiotherapist role in global health?" Now, what we would like to know is what's the story behind that editorial that you wrote? How did you come to write that? And I am imagining that that's going to throw up lots of interesting questions.
Yes, actually, it was quite interesting because as Hong Kong Physiotherapy Journal is, the editor is one of my colleagues, and I'm kind of being the person who does qualitative research as well as more social aspects of health. So there was this article that they knew that they're going to publish, and then they were saying, "Hey Veronika, don't you want to just write an editorial? This is one of your area. We don't know what to do. Okay, this is what you can come up with." So I looked at the article, which is based in Nigeria, and it kind of gave me really some interesting insights into, yes, physiotherapy, the role in physiotherapy in an African country. But then at the same time, there were like basic things of, okay, non-communicable disease are actually all around the world. And their approach is to say, okay, should we include nutrition in the physiotherapy practice? And these are the questions that I'm actually kind of thinking about. What is the role actually that we're doing? And then by thinking about this context, which is a low-income country, as you said, and I worked in very developed, rich countries, as you can say, that at the end of the day, it's the problems on the biological levels might be the same. But then when you think about the more contextual factors, environmental factors, and even policy factors, then suddenly the whole practice actually changes. And this is how actually I started to think about, well, what is it that it defines us as physiotherapists? And yes, you have the approach, but then you also need to think of what is it that the environment that you're working in. And this is probably where then I draw upon some of my previous experiences that, yes, I was treating low back pain patients in the US, or I had a patient that was actually a sprained ankle that you say, oh yeah, evidence-based practice, this is going to do. But it ended up being completely different because it's a vulnerable person. It was financially really difficult as a waitress, not getting a lot of money. So there were suddenly many issues that actually it was not such a straightforward case. And so when you have all these thoughts, then you think, okay, now I need to stop. I need to write something. Okay, how do we approach this? And I think the main ideas that that also follows in my research is on one thing, there are determinants that are way beyond the individuals, if we look at the patient side. And then there is also the physiotherapist that is working in a certain context that is actually affected by globalization, by policy, by the practice setting that they are working with. So you have patients that are influenced by the setting as well as physiotherapists. And then the next step is looking at how do we do research? And then suddenly we do evidence-based research, which kind of unifies, and these randomized controlled trials that you try to get rid of all those aspects that are actually influence our practice. And then it becomes very muddy. So the ideas that I draw upon is really thinking much more of what is it, the practice that is culturally dependent and influenced by the context. And then this is probably how I would define global health, that you can learn and draw upon some of the insights from other countries, but it actually cannot just be copied to another context in that sense.
So that's such a loaded statement or piece of information that you've just provided us with. So what I'm thinking is, so if when we're talking about the health of an individual, we're looking at their biology, which is the same, we could say, for every patient. So low back pain, ankle sprain, we can approach all of those the same. It's when we're talking about the context within which we see these, whether it's the context within which we are in or which the patient is coming from. And so is that how we should think about global? And I guess those contexts are the things that we can't transfer between different settings, or low resource, high resource, even neighbouring countries, even neighbouring towns, things like that. So how do we, as physiotherapists, how should we try and bring this into our clinical practice, do you think?
I think, and it's probably, I think the groundbreaking solution for me was when I read Michael Marmot's work that he has been doing for the last 30 years. So he's an epidemiologist, I think, by training, and he has worked a lot on the social determinants of health. And at the end of the day, I think the way we should approach our role as physiotherapists, or the patient's understanding of the illness that they have, is to really think in layers. And there is the rainbow model that he suggested in actually one of the WHO work that is originally with Dahlgren, that kind of looks at it like an onion. I always say, well, at the middle you have the biology. You have like what you know, as a physio, you're filled with anatomy, physiology, pathophysiology, whatever. You can even count psychology to that kind of basic individual aspect. But then the next layer is in what setting they're embedded. So what is the social community? What is the network that they have? Do they have support systems? Do they have family? And then you have the ideas of social capital and social bonding. So the one is on the affective side, but it's very instrumental. Then the next layer is job, housing, education, everything that we know in a rich country with well-educated person has completely different outlook of how he will be treated, and also whether he will be sick or not. And then on the last layer, you have the whole influence on policies. So what is actually the social system? What is the education system? How do vulnerable people really get supported or not? So, and if you look at it from this layered perspective, you can actually try to see, okay, where can we have an impact as physios? Yes, on the biological level, you can get all the research that is done there. But then I think, and this is probably where my sociologist side comes in, is that we should look at these other layers as well. And how much can we really either refer them further or look for help for them in certain areas. So, and that's probably why, coming back to the article and editorial that I was writing, it was really to think, well, it's what is our job? At the end of the day, you need to see what are the resources available to include nutrition, because there are no dietitians around. So there is not even the setting. So who will actually take care of this, rather than say, well, I'm just responsible for exercise, or I'm just responsible for this. So I cannot just say, well, you should do this as a physio. But it would be helpful to have a little bit a conceptual model that really makes you reflect on your own practice as a physiotherapist. And this is actually my whole point to talking about either social determinants of health or global health, that you, at the end of the day, nobody can tell you what should be done, because you're probably the one who knows you, your patient, the resources in the community, and so on. And probably I also think that it's what makes the expertise of physiotherapists. And you're not just somebody who applies some techniques to an individual, but it's actually that what goes way beyond of what can probably be written down in any guidelines.
So what it's making me think is is this my understanding of our role in global health? From what you're saying, I'm thinking, obviously we all know that we have a role in individual patient health, to address that the biology in the center that you were talking about. And then I guess if we are able to expand our role and would like to consider the global picture, we need to start looking at the other layers too. And that will have an impact on individual patient health, obviously, because everyone will have different aspects of those layers. But as we do that, as we look through those layers, we're getting more and more, as we come more to the outside of the onion, we're addressing more the global health issues, aren't we? So if our role in global health is to look at these issues, and I guess then what we're doing is we're considering not just individual patient health, but we're looking at community health, aren't we?
I think it expands also from a more population health perspective, and this is probably what might be also the difference. And if you look at there is some literature that defines the medical model versus the social model. So the medical model is very individual based versus the social model of health that is actually much more community oriented and much more population health based. So if you think of global health, well, if you have a very individualized treatment to just one single patient, even if it is perfect, you might have actually less impact than when you look at it from a community setting. And how could you, as an expert in mobility, really bring more than just one treatment to one patient at one time, but having a much more, actually more impact with a social model where you look way beyond just an ACL or a shoulder problem.
So it might be something like, if we can draw, I'm thinking of an example, if we can bring an example, you might have a patient that comes to you with the ACL and you say, you need to do this exercise program, you need to go to the gym every day. And they will say, I don't have a gym to go to. And so that's where we need to start considering not just finding a solution for that individual person, but maybe we think this whole town doesn't have a gym. Mm-hmm. And I know that we can't go out and build a gym, but it's something, is that where we might have, that's where we're going to have a big impact on global health, if we can start influencing communities in that way. And it might be just that we go to the mayor and say, your town needs a gym because your population is unhealthy or something. Is that?
That's perfectly in the direction, because then what you're addressing is actually the third layer, where you look at the environment, where you look at what facilities are needed, right? But then, as you say, you have to go to the mayor, so you would have to need impact on the political side or the policy level in order to then really make it trickle down individually. But if you think this way as an advocate rather than as a specialist treating musculoskeletal problems, this is where I come from, then yes, your nature of work will change quite a bit. because you will talk to many more people. You will go to networking sessions with the mayor, or you make friends with the architects, or you would actually have a different approach as a professional. And when you think this way, then you would replace some of the physio working one-on-one to patients to actually community setup or political influence, advocacy for certain groups. And I think today, and that's probably also where I got disappointed when I looked at the global health initiatives in physiotherapy, they're very limited because we're still on a one-on-one interaction basis that we can do well for the patient, yes, but the impact, to have a wider impact, you would actually need to think bigger and broader, and then it will change the nature of what we're really trained for.
So what I guess we have to decide as a profession, or as individuals as well, is how much impact do we want to have, isn't it? Do we want to continue to treat at an individual person illness level and see people that are coming to us with illness and injury, or do we want to have a wider impact and move towards that wellness model? And I know you use those terms in your editorial, the illness model and the wellness model, because we potentially, if we choose to, we can have a huge impact and work towards a more a wellness model where we're promoting health instead of treating ill health.
Mm-hmm. I think this is one, and I think the push in this direction, like promotion, health promotion, has been quite strong. But even coming back to the patient population, I think it would even help to improve communities if we apply the same thinking, not only to prevention, but also to treatment. I had a group of students doing their final year project. So they interviewed stroke survivors, and they wanted to know how they do exercises and what motivates them. And it's nothing new. It's just in a Chinese context, which confirms actually the Western literature, is that it's about family support, it's about peer support, it's about the neighbor who said, oh, let's go and do it. And even if the weather was bad, weather was actually not a barrier for exercise. And then you would say, well, yes, you could treat those stroke survivors individually, but actually you could think of, well, if they need peer support, family support, well, then talk to the family, to caregivers, put them in a group, and then see whether you can make them work. So I think, yes, health promotion is one big area where there is a little bit more money into it. But even on the treatment side, I think there is a lot of potential if you stop thinking, well, I have to treat this patient and only because I treat him, it gets better. This is probably a little bit a limited view of how you can have for a whole community.
So I guess, I mean, it's quite confusing, isn't it? I think it's an interesting conversation to have, because it's talking about changing the way we practice, isn't it, as a profession? Yes. What do you think? Do you think there's scope for us to take this on? Because it's just talking to, when I think about it and talking to it, just feels huge, and it feels like, oh, this is, or I don't really know what to do. I'm just going to stick to treating my individual patients, and many physiotherapists will think like that. So I'm just wondering, does our profession have scope to take it on? And if we do, as individual physiotherapists, I wonder what the one thing is that we could do in each interaction with our patient to have an impact on global health.
It is a huge task, and I don't think we, even as a smaller profession, that we can solve all those big problems. And I don't think this is not really where we need to head for, because this will create frustrations, and I don't think this is very helpful. I think what might be one way to really think about, and I think this is also what I pointed out in my editorial, is become aware of it. I mean, if you have never thought of this and nobody tells you to think about this, then nothing will happen anyway. So it's like a first step. And I think it's great what you're doing, that you start to put this out there and say, well, we don't have any solutions, but look, there is an issue out there. there are different ways of thinking about it. Well, why don't we just start at least thinking about it? And then if you want to get one, but I'm always surprised when I do video interaction. I film now Chinese context. I have now some European context. And it's really interesting to see what is it that makes the interaction really successful, and part of it is the context as well. So I see that in Asia they have a lot of pressure on time. So yes, this has an impact on practice, but this is not something they can change because there's just not enough physios around, so they have to see the patients. But probably think about, well, which indication would actually be the most beneficial? How can I get my time and then really make the best use of the time? Again, that would be probably a decision to really decide where you could have an impact and how you could think more creatively. And this is probably another thing. I think there are many good ideas around, but they're always locally presented. And when I look at the research that is done, the ones that makes it in the big journals, they're not the ones that are the local ones, because they're like case studies, and case studies are on the evidence base down there. It's really low. So sometimes I feel like there is a missing tool or I don't know, a bowl where you can put those good ideas that have been tried and used to use for others to try as well. So sometimes it's just, oh, I haven't thought about it. Well, I could try this out. And it would be the first step of making probably a little bit a global move into something small that becomes bigger. So I see it like a way of, first of all, increasing awareness, and then probably look a little bit outside and see what others are doing, and see whether you might apply one idea or the other to your own patients. And this is probably beyond just the individual, and to really ask them in what setting they're living and how do they feel in their communities, and is there anything that would help you do the exercise or would help you. So even on this kind of history-taking level, I'm not sure how well we really do currently, because we focus so much on the path mechanisms of illness. So I think this would be a very easy to start with, and probably would be quite surprising that you would discover things that you never thought. And this is what the students then said. Well, actually, I never thought that this would have an impact. Well, you have never asked. And they're actually graduates, they're new graduates. So they go out in the workforce, but they never thought about this before.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, so there's 2 points there, isn't there? I think number one, we need to become aware of this conversation, don't we? It's really good to become aware of this conversation and to start talking about it and trying to understand what our role is. And we all talk about, non-communicable diseases and our role in that, and the social determinants of health and where we can have an impact with that. And we are movement experts, and we can ask them to do that. Physical activity, improve that sort of thing, because that's where we know what we're doing. But the one other thing we can do is just to become aware, and then to ask one question, isn't it, with each patient? So like you say about their community, or what other thing would make a really big difference to your health, and just becoming aware of those things, I think, in the community that you work in may lead to places where you can have an impact.
Mm-hmm. And I think also probably one more thing that this is for all the researchers who do research, that we probably stop doing more testing of interventions versus A and B, but really try to dig in the more difficult areas where it's actually not so clear cut. But sometimes I think like it doesn't help to have a very strong research base just in one direction, but we should actually be more diverse, knowing that these have repercussions on research money that you only get when you do a certain type of thing. So there are many other things, but I think this is another thing, because if you have research areas also within global health, let's say that there are funds available, or there are really collaborations possible between different countries, and then this would also help to make things that work more apparent and are contextual, but how do they adjust it actually to different contexts? But this is another story that goes well beyond of what a physio can do in their own practice.
Exactly. I think, there's a lot of other researchers out there outside of the physiotherapy profession doing quite a lot of research in these areas, and if we can bring some of that research into our profession and apply it to our profession, it's like applying it to our profession, isn't it? And seeing where we can go with that. It is an interesting direction to take research, definitely, and it's the only way it can be done in this, and as you say, because contexts are so different around the world, and it's the only way that we can address these issues to have an impact on global health, as we call it, and whether we'll still be using that term in the future, I don't know. Our role in global health, I don't know, because it's too big and scary, I think, and that's why we're having trouble understanding it at this stage. So I'm sure it will evolve over time, but the first step is for us all to start thinking about it and start thinking how we can have that impact, isn't it?
Well, I think there is the next WCPT conference that is in Africa. I think they have a panel on. I just looked quickly at the program, and there was one on global health also. So I think there are kind of pushes, and these are good platforms, because then you bring the people all together, and then you can say, oh, you're working on this as well, but you're on the other side of the world, or at least to kind of bring the resources a little bit together, that you don't have to start from scratch. But what you're saying, also collaborating with others, I think this is the future, that you cannot do everything alone, and that you start to work with whatever discipline is working in this. Is it public health, or is it international development, or whatever other areas? But as you say, it's sometimes a little bit big to tackle. And then fine. So these are probably things but the more that it is talked about, I think the better it will get, because then people start to think more about it.
Yeah, definitely. And so it's been really good to have this conversation with you today. I know it's not your big area of research or the only thing that you do, but following on from that editorial, it's just been good to follow up and have that conversation with you. Is there anything that we haven't talked about, or I haven't questioned you on or brought up, that related to this, that you would like to talk about or mention or highlight?
No, I think this is all I can say, probably, in terms of what my little opinion on global health is. And I think it's great that you start doing these modules to get to talk about it, and I will definitely participate.
Excellent, that's really good. Well, it's been an absolute delight to talk to you today. I think conversations with lots of different people who are interested in global health all around the world is a great place to start. And so thank you so much for talking to us today. It's been really good.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for having me in here.
You're welcome. So Veronika, before you go, what I'd just like to, if anyone can find out more about you, we will share a link to the editorial that we've been talking about, which can be made, is available. Is there anywhere that people can find out more about you, or are you on Twitter or anything where people could contact you?
Well, I work at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. So if you go to the website, Department of Rehabilitation Science, this is where you find mine. I have a website as well under Weebly, which is weeschoeb.weebly.com. So in case somebody wants to know a little bit more what I do, in life and in work, and could probably just find out through that.
That's great. We'll share links to those things with this video. So again, just thank you for talking to us today, and good luck with all your work.
Thank you very much, and good luck with your course. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.